Germany's energy crisis in critical condition. It is becoming abundantly clear that as the world's financial crisis unfolds and the world economy's decline, Uniper, the leading provider of electricity in Germany and an international energy giant, is on the verge of going bankrupt. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the ensuing disruptions to the European energy market have left it on the brink of insolvency. Consequently, a disaster comparable to the Great Depression would commence if Uniper went bankrupt. Thus, the German government agreed to buy a 98% stake in the company for €8 billion in September of this year. And as a result of this agreement, Uniper will be a state-owned company. So will the country be protected from the impending winter by this nationalization? Hi, welcome back to Finance Sense, where we cover all the latest trends in the financial markets and the economy. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click on the notification bell to stay updated with our videos. That said, let's start. In 2016, Uniper was established after being separated from its predecessor, E.ON, an integrated electricity producer and distributor. Gas and electricity are distributed to end consumers through power and distribution lines under the management of E.ON. However, the newly established Uniper had control over the power plants. The company was performing pretty well until Russia's Ukraine invasion started. They saw a record year in 2021 as the economy recovered from the pandemic, earning an operating cash flow of more than €3.5 billion. Uniper ran huge power plants throughout Germany to generate electricity, most of which used coal or natural gas. Early in the 1970s, the company that would become Uniper began collaborating with Russia's state-owned gas giant Gazprom. The Nord Stream pipeline, which Uniper built and used to supply its power plants, was a culmination of all of this. In fact, the pipeline was so successful that Uniper invested close to €1 billion in the construction of Nord Stream 2. When it finally opened in 2022, they believed this would become a significant growth driver. However, on February 22, 2022, Russia formally recognized the two Ukrainian separatist regions, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz quickly revoked the Nord Stream 2 pipeline certification. If a gas pipeline cannot transport gas, it is worthless. Therefore, Uniper was compelled to immediately reduce its investment by €1 billion. At its peak, the company had a market value of €15 billion. So this alone would not have been enough to bring about a collapse. But this was merely the start of the company's difficulties. The Russians have decided that if you don't want gas from Nord Stream 2, you won't get any gas at all. As a result of the disruption in gas supplies through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, gas prices in Europe have increased by 20-fold. According to their CEO, Uniper began losing €60 million per day when the Nord Stream pipeline was shut down. The stock price had dropped by 90%, they were severely low on cash, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. At first glance, it's not entirely clear why high gas prices would be detrimental to Uniper. Uniper is a supplier, not a gas or electricity consumer. Families that have to pay their electric and gas bills are undoubtedly the losers in this situation. But if anything, energy providers like Uniper should receive a massive increase in revenue as they sell their products at much higher rates. However, Uniper has also been the loser for two primary reasons. First, they had signed long-term fixed-price contracts with German energy distributors and utility firms. Accordingly, they are required by law to provide certain quantities of gas and electricity, which are eventually consumed by homes and businesses. Normally, this would be a good deal. They have signed long-term contracts with Gazprom to supply the necessary amounts of gas. Gazprom has always been a dependable supplier, delivering around the same quantity of gas every day up until the war began. Uniper was lucky to not have to worry about the daily fluctuations in the gas markets, thanks to fixed-price contracts with their suppliers. However, this became a complete disaster when the Nord Stream pipeline was partially cut off in August and then completely in early September. They were forced to purchase the gas on the open market. This occurred when nearly all European nations were dealing with similar issues and competing with one another for the few resources left. As a result, prices have increased 20 times more than they would have. Thus, the whole burden of the energy crisis fell on Uniper, who received almost no profit from higher revenues. The second reason is that the natural gas pipelines, which Uniper either fully or partially controls, are underutilized. Since natural gas is 100 times less energy dense, it is more difficult to transport them than crude oil. Due to its complexity, transportation is often costly, accounting for half of the total cost. Whether a pipeline slows down by 10%, 50%, or 100%, the cost of operating it is almost completely fixed. It virtually costs the same to maintain and ensure its safety. When it became apparent that Russian gas would not be a long-term sustainable option, Uniper rushed to seek alternatives. A so-called floating liquefied natural gas terminal, or LNG, was established throughout the summer. This ship can offload LNG into a pipeline located at the port and convert it back to a liquid state. However, a few issues will prevent them from importing LNG from countries like the US and Qatar. First, constructing these LNG terminals takes a lot of time and effort. By the winter, most experts predict that Germany will only be able to replace less than half of its previous Russian supply. Second, due to underinvestment during the pandemic and extreme stimulus measures in developed nations, a natural gas crisis will affect the entire world. And because of this, global LNG prices have skyrocketed to around 5 times more than usual. Even if this isn't as bad as the 20-fold rise we've seen in Europe, it would still be over Uniper's contractual prices when you consider the extra shipping expenses. And even if Germany suddenly developed the ability to import LNG, there would still be capacity issues for the exporting nations. To replace Russian gas would require years and billions of dollars in investment. Meanwhile, Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, visited Canada last summer to push for more LNG exports. But the Canadians told him it would not be economically feasible, so he returned home empty-handed. Similarly, he traveled to the United Arab Emirates to ask for gas, but could only obtain one boatload, which wouldn't arrive until 2023. They were fully booked for all of their earlier productions. Simply said, Uniper cannot escape bankruptcy. The collapse of Uniper would be an economic catastrophe for Germany. The company controls 40% of Germany's natural gas supply. Millions, if not tens of millions of homes and businesses across the nation will lose power if they fail to uphold their obligations. Nearly a quarter of the nation's GDP is made up of heavy industry, the majority of which is electricity or natural gas intensive. Furthermore, the energy crisis has already been disastrous for businesses that weren't fortunate enough to have fixed-price supply contracts. Knowing this, the European Union is already building facilities to ration the scarce supplies among its many state members. In the end, there is simply not enough gas. You cannot heat your home with paper money, regardless of the financial engineering or subsidy plans you implement. But technically speaking, you can. During the Weimar hyperinflation, this was accomplished in Germany around 100 years ago today, but it would need far more money than 200 million euros to pull it off now. Hi, we hope you like watching this video and learned something important. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on our videos. And make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. This is Finance Sense, helping you keep up with all the latest trends in the financial markets and the economy. Until next time!